The phone rang just as the sky over Hartford turned the color of bruised lavender. Eleanor Ellie Whitmore reached for the receiver out of habit. She wasn't supposed to hear what came next, only the soft click of a second line picking up. "Don't forget to act grateful when we surprise her," came a voice she knew too well. Victoria Whitmore, her older sister by 2 years, always sounded like champagne bright, fizzy, and meant for an audience. Ellie froze. Her thumb hovered over the receiver's cradle. Pulse climbing. Then came Richard Whitmore, their father, his tone as dry and cold as the marble foyer he loved to brag about. "She'll smile or she's out." Simple. And a third voice. Her mother, Marion Whitmore, smooth as silk wrapping barbed wire. Perfect. Everyone will be there to see it. A sound left Ellie's throat before she could stop it. A small, involuntary gasp. She covered the receiver, holding her breath. On the other line, laughter chimed, practiced and perfect. Then the click of disconnection. Silence. Ellie's hand trembled as she set the receiver back into its cradle. Her reflection in the kitchen window stared back at her 34. Steady job. Still living half in their orbit because she believed she owed them. Believed love was something you earned through service. The Whitmores weren't cruel in the way that leaves bruises. They were refined in their cruelty, polite dismissals wrapped in gratitude, expectations disguised as compliments. "Ellie, you're so good with numbers. Darling, handle the charity finances. Ellie, dear, you're so thoughtful. Could you manage the catering?" And she had. Every Christmas, she paid invoices they never saw, fixed the silent errors that would have embarrassed the family name. But this time, they planned to humiliate her at their annual Christmas Eve dinner. Ellie pressed both palms against the counter, breathing in slow, deliberate rhythm. Outside, sleet began to fall, tapping against the glass like impatient fingers. Inside, the kitchen clock ticked, each second louder than the last. She replayed their words, her father's command, her mother's approval, her sister's snicker. Every syllable built a small tower of betrayal in her chest. "She'll smile or she's out." The phrase looped until it hardened into something else clarity. Ellie reached for the notebook she kept tucked inside the junk drawer. Its pages were filled with neat columns expenses, account numbers, receipts she'd paid on behalf of the family, every cent she'd poured into their perfection. Tonight, her handwriting looked different, slanted, firm, decisive. One column what I owe them, one longer column what they owe me. She felt calm, too calm, the kind that arrives just before a storm breaks. Her phone buzzed with a message from Victoria. "Don't be late tomorrow." "Sis, dress nice. You're the guest of honor." Ellie stared at the screen until her reflection blurred. Then she typed only 2 words. "Wouldn't miss it." She turned off the kitchen light, letting her face fade into the window's darkness. For the first time in her life, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like strategy. Tomorrow, the Whitmores would get their show. They just didn't know who'd be writing the final act. Morning light crept across the Whitmore estate like a secret unwilling to be spoken. In the pale glow, Eleanor Ellie Whitmore moved quietly through her apartment above the garage, her assigned space. A polite exile built on gratitude. She'd lived there since college, paying rent her parents never remembered to collect. To them, it was charity. To her, it was distance. Ellie sat on the edge of her bed, the scent of winter pressing against the frosted glass. On the dresser, family photos lined up like curated lies, her parents and Victoria smiling center frame. Ellie always half-turned, cropped at the edge. She used to think it was coincidence. Now, she saw it for what it was editing. Her mind drifted to the last Christmas she spent truly trying, the year she bought Marion the silk scarf from Paris, the one her mother wore once before gifting it to her bridge partner, the year her father promised she'd have a seat beside him at dinner but placed her at the far end, next to the caterer. The year Vicky announced her engagement mid-meal and everyone forgot Ellie's promotion entirely. Back then, she smiled through the sting, believing good behavior would earn her belonging. That if she worked hard enough, they'd see her not as a resource but as a daughter. But good deeds had become currency, and in the Whitmore family, love was always overdrawn. Ellie rose and crossed to the small desk where years of invoices lay stacked in order proof of invisible labor. Donations processed through her accounts. Vendors paid under her name. Catering invoices that never once bore the Whitmore signature. She touched the top page, her handwriting steady and small. Each line was another act of erasure disguised as devotion. She thought of her sister's easy laughter, her mother's orchestrated charm, her father's measured approval that vanished the moment she disagreed. Every memory tightened around her chest like piano wire, yet beneath the ache, a quiet awareness stirred this time. She wasn't powerless. She had the records, the control, and for once, the plan. Outside, the gardener blew leaves into neat piles along the circular drive. The rhythm of the machine hummed like a metronome as Ellie scribbled notes in her ledger caterer reroute. Florist cancel, delivery redirect, control through precision, her family's favorite language, now spoken fluently by their quiet daughter. Her phone chimed again. A text from Aunt Rosalind, Rosie Carter, Marion's estranged sister, the only Whitmore who'd ever noticed Ellie's silences. Heard they're planning something flashy again. You okay? Sweetheart. Ellie stared at the message before replying, Don't worry. This year, I'm planning too. She slipped her coat on, stepped outside into the crisp air, and breathed in the cold until it steadied her. The snow had started early that year, blanketing everything in the kind of white that made people believe in purity. Ellie knew better. Snow didn't purify, it buried. And before the Whitmores' grand Christmas spectacle was over, they'd learn just how much could be buried and what would remain when it melted. That night, Eleanor Ellie Whitmore sat at her desk, the glow from her laptop illuminating rows of spreadsheets, decades of transactions that told the story her family never would. Every number was a confession in ink catering deposits under her card, charity donations processed through her account, household expenses tagged miscellaneous that she quietly covered. She'd built their reputation one receipt at a time, her name hidden beneath theirs. Now, she traced each entry with calm precision. She didn't need to shout. Power wasn't volume, it was timing. Her pen glided down the page. One list for what I owed them, one longer list for what they owed me. The columns stared back, balanced perfectly until tonight. In another tab, she opened vendor contacts. The Whitmore Christmas Gala had 30 suppliers, florists, caterers, delivery services, photographers. Each one trusted Ellie implicitly. She'd been the family's organizer for years. With a few quiet emails and midnight phone calls, she began to rewrite the evening's script. The florist's arrangements, once bound for the Whitmore dining hall, would now brighten the lobby of the Children's Hospital downtown. The caterer's order would feed the St. Augustine shelter. Even the custom monogrammed napkins printed with the family crest would wrap meals for the city's homeless. Ellie watched as her plan took shape like choreography, every step silent, deliberate, necessary. Between calls, her phone buzzed with another message from her sister. Victoria Whitmore, don't forget the cranberry tart. Mom's obsessed. Ellie's lips curved in a faint smile. The tart was already scheduled for delivery to the shelter kitchen. Let her obsess, she murmured. Someone else will appreciate it. A knock at the door startled her. Aunt Rosalind. Rosie Carter stood outside, her cheeks red from the cold. She'd driven in unannounced, holding a thermos of cocoa like a peace offering. You working yourself into another ulcer? Ellie just straightening records? Rosie studied her niece's face, reading the determination behind the calm. Don't let them turn you to ice. I'm not, Ellie said softly. I'm turning the ice into glass. After Rosie left, Ellie returned to her desk, slipping the phone into silent mode. Snow fell thicker now, blanketing the estate grounds below her window. The world outside looked serene, untouched, but she knew better. Tomorrow night, the Whitmores would take the stage they built for themselves, unaware that every spotlight, every catered dish, every toast was already hers to redirect. Control wasn't noise. It was the pause before the music changed, and Ellie had learned to conduct silence like a symphony. December 24th arrived wrapped in gold and glass. The Whitmore mansion gleamed under strings of warm lights that curved across its iron gates like a crown. Inside, laughter echoed through marbled halls, rehearsed and hollow. Richard Whitmore, proud patriarch, moved from guest to guest with a scotch in hand. Speaking of legacy and resilience, Marion Whitmore floated beside him, her smile delicate, her eyes calculating every whisper. From the balcony above, Ellie Whitmore, watched unseen. She had dressed for the occasion, black silk, simple, unyielding. It wasn't vanity, it was armor. Below, her sister Victoria Whitmore dazzled in crimson sequins, surrounded by laughter she mistook for admiration. The orchestra tuned softly, glasses clinked, the smell of roasted chestnuts mingled with pine and candle wax. Guests praised Marion's perfection, how every year she outdid herself. Marion accepted with a gracious nod, never admitting Ellie had arranged every detail for years. But not this year. Ellie leaned against the banister, studying the tableau below. Every chandelier shimmered, every silver fork caught the light yet beneath the polish. Something trembled. A lie could only hold so long before cracking under its own weight. At the corner of the room, Aunt Rosalind. Rosie Carter caught Ellie's gaze. She lifted her glass in silent acknowledgement, a quiet toast to truth. Ellie nodded once. A signal passed between the only two people in that house who weren't pretending. Outside, snow began again, soft and relentless, brushing the windows like a warning. Ellie checked her phone, every delivery confirmed, every reroute complete. The night's script was set. From below, Marion's voice carried, "When she arrives, we'll toast to family unity." Ellie's pulse steadied. They thought they were waiting for a victim to perform gratitude. They were waiting for the author of their undoing, and by the time the first toast was raised, every secret they'd buried under chandeliers and crystal would surface one glittering truth at a time. The side door creaked like an old secret, giving itself away. Ellie Whitmore stepped inside, snow clinging to the hem of her coat, melting into small ghosts on the marble floor. The hum of conversation drifted from the dining hall, laughter, glasses, the hollow rhythm of people who believed they were safe. She moved quietly, following the sound of the orchestra tuning between courses, her heartbeat steady, almost serene, above the din. She heard her mother's voice, smooth, performative, designed for an audience. When she finally shows, we'll toast to forgiveness. Forgiveness. The word tasted like iron. Ellie paused in the hallway, adjusting her gloves. The mirrored wall caught her reflection. Calm face, unreadable eyes. She had spent a lifetime learning to disappear. Tonight, she would make every second of that invisibility count. She stepped into the light. The dining room fell silent mid-laughter. Richard Whitmore, mid-sentence, lowered his glass. Marion Whitmore. His practiced smile froze like porcelain under a sudden chill. Victoria. Whitmore turned first, her voice pitched just loud enough for the audience. "Well, look who decided to join us." Her lips curled, every syllable dripping with satisfaction. "Don't worry. Everyone we saved the best joke for last." A ripple of uneasy laughter followed, thin and uncertain. Ellie didn't speak. She walked the length of the table, her boots clicking softly on the wood floor. The sound was the only rhythm in the room. She could feel every eye tracking her. A lifetime of scrutiny condensed into one slow movement. When she reached the end of the table, she stopped, resting one gloved hand on the back of a chair. "Funny," she said evenly. "That's exactly what I came to say." Victoria's smirk faltered. The room waited for a punchline that never came. Ellie's voice stayed soft, but it carried. "I didn't come for your toast. I came for my receipts." A murmur rippled through the guests. Marian blinked, confused. Richard's jaw tightened. Ellie's calm unsettled them more than any outburst could. She reached into her coat pocket, the faint rustle of paper slicing through the silence. A single envelope, thick and deliberate, glinted under the chandelier light. "You wanted a stage," she said quietly, placing it on the table. "You built it yourselves." Then she looked at her father steady, unblinking. "So let's begin." The air inside the Whitmore dining hall shifted, heavy with the weight of what was coming. And for the first time in that house, it wasn't applause that followed, it was fear. No one moved. The envelope lay between champagne flutes and candlelight like a live wire waiting to spark. Eleanor Ellie Whitmore stood still, her gloves damp from melted snow, her calm the sharpest weapon in the room. Richard Whitmore was the first to break the silence. "What is this?" Ellie met his gaze. "An audit," she said. Soft gasps fluttered through the guests. Marian Whitmore laughed lightly, the brittle sound of someone trying to hold the script together. "Darling, we can discuss whatever this is after dinner." But Ellie didn't move. She slid the envelope forward, her gloved fingers leaving faint streaks of water on the wood. It stopped in front of her mother's plate. "Everything in there," Ellie said evenly, "was paid by me. The catering, the flowers, even the custom linens with your initials. Every toast you're about to make, you're drinking on my tab." The air changed. Chairs creaked. "Victoria Whitmore's voice wavered between a scoff and a sneer. "You expect us to believe that? That you paid for all this?" Ellie tilted her head slightly. "Believe it or not, it's all there. Signatures, transfers, invoices. I kept everything." A guest leaned closer to read the papers. Another whispered, "She's not joking." Marian's hand trembled as she pulled the documents out, her manicured nails scraping the envelope's edge. The color drained from her face as she scanned the top page. "You rerouted the catering." Ellie nodded. "Every dish, every tray. They're serving at the shelters tonight, families who actually need it." The room rippled with disbelief. "You gave away our Christmas dinner." Richard's voice cracked through the stillness. "No," Ellie replied softly. "I gave it meaning. For a moment." Even the orchestra stopped. The only sound was the soft flicker of the candles. Victoria laughed too loudly, desperate for control. "You're bluffing." "She's bluffing." "Right." No one answered. They all saw the truth in Marian's trembling fingers. Ellie's gaze swept the table each guest, each relative who had clapped for the Whitmore's perfection year after year. "You wanted a show," she said quietly. "Here it is." The chandelier above shimmered, its light scattering across silverware and glass like fractured judgment. Ellie turned slightly toward the window where snow fell thicker now, her reflection ghosting in the glass. "Dinner's already been served," she said, almost to herself, "just not here." And as her words settled, the Whitmore family's perfect party began to unravel one silent revelation at a time. The doorbell rang just as Marian Whitmore's trembling hands dropped the last page of invoices onto her plate. The sharp chime sliced through the silence, jolting every guest upright. Richard Whitmore frowned, his authority cracked but not yet surrendered. "We're not expecting anyone," he muttered. Another chime. Louder, insistent. A nervous cousin rose to answer. When the door opened, a gust of cold air swept in along with 3 men in dark coats, their arms stacked with boxes stamped with a logo no one recognized. "Delivery for the Whitmore family," the tallest one said. His tone was even, rehearsed the voice of someone who delivered both packages and consequences. "There's been a mistake," Richard barked. "No mistake, sir," the man replied, prepaid and signed for by Eleanor Whitmore. Every head turned. Ellie didn't flinch. "Bring them in," she said. The men stepped forward, setting one box squarely in the center of the dining table. Red poinsettias toppled. Wax dripped onto the linen. The Whitmore's perfect table setting looked suddenly fragile. "What is this?" Marion whispered. "Your Christmas dinner," Ellie replied. "Or what's left of it." The room pulsed with confusion. Guests glanced at one another, trying to read the scene. Who was the villain? Who was the victim? Every tray, every roast, every bottle of champagne. Ellie continued. "Delivered tonight to shelters across the city. The name on the boxes says Whitmore. You wanted to host. Now you are." A gasp broke from one of the cousins. "Victoria," Whitmore turned pale, then flushed red. "You ungrateful, not ungrateful," Ellie interrupted. "Unpaid, unnoticed, uninvited until you needed someone to foot the bill." Richard slammed his fist on the table, rattling the silverware. "You've embarrassed this family," Ellie's voice cut through his outrage like winter wind. "No. Father. I've exposed it." Snow whirled outside the window, flakes catching in the chandelier's glow. The light fractured, shimmering across faces stunned into silence. The deliverymen tipped their hats politely, turned, and vanished into the cold. As the front door closed behind them, the sound lingered a final seal over a truth that could no longer be hidden. The perfect Whitmore Christmas had just been delivered, but not to the address anyone expected. The deliveryman's footsteps faded, leaving the Whitmore dining room wrapped in stunned quiet. The guests stared at the empty platters, at the ruined centerpiece, at Eleanor Ellie Whitmore, who stood perfectly still, calm amid their chaos. Candlelight flickered against her face, half shadow, half flame. Victoria Whitmore was the first to recover, her voice high, brittle. "You think this makes you noble? You humiliated all of us for what attention?" Ellie's gaze drifted to her sister, then to the card she held between two fingers, a simple white envelope, sealed with wax. Her sister's name written in the steady handwriting of someone who no longer trembled. "No," Ellie said softly. "I'm not asking for attention. I'm giving you closure." She set the card on the table, the gesture quiet but heavy, like placing evidence in court. "What's that?" Richard demanded. "Something I've owed her for years," Ellie replied. Victoria hesitated, then tore it open. Inside, bank statements, credit card printouts, and a short handwritten note. As she read, the color drained from her face. This isn't real," she whispered. "It's real," Ellie said evenly. "Every account you've ever used under my name. Every expense I covered to keep the family image. Every debt you pretended didn't exist, now frozen. Every card, canceled." The room erupted in hushed gasps. Guests shifted in their chairs, torn between sympathy and fascination. "You're bluffing," Victoria cried, fumbling for her phone. Ellie folded her arms. "Check your balance." The glow of the screen lit Victoria's face in cold blue. Her jaw dropped. A faint sound left her throat. Half gasp, half disbelief. Marion rose from her seat, panic slicing through her poise. "You can't do this. Those accounts were mine." Ellie interrupted, her tone calm. Final. "You taught me that family means debt disguised as duty." "I'm just returning the lesson." Richard's voice thundered. "You've gone too far." Ellie's eyes met his, unflinching. "No, I've gone far enough." The chandelier trembled from the weight of silence. Ellie turned toward the staircase, her boots clicking against the wood. "Dinner's over," she said softly. "Now comes the reckoning." And as she walked away, no one dared stop her. The staircase groaned beneath Eleanor Ellie Whitmore's steps, each creak echoing through the hollow quiet of the mansion behind her. The murmurs from the dining room rose and fell like a wounded animal. Panic, disbelief, denial. But no one followed. No one dared. She reached the second floor, where the air smelled faintly of pine polish and old perfume. Family portraits lined the hallway, faces smiling in perfect formation. Richard Whitmore, regal and stern, Marion Whitmore, elegant and cold, Victoria Whitmore, radiant and adored, and Ellie, always slightly turned away, captured mid-blink, like an afterthought in her own lineage. She paused before her childhood door, painted lavender and trimmed with gold. Her hand lingered on the knob, her reflection warping in its brass surface. For a heartbeat, she felt 12 again, small, eager, waiting for approval that never came. Then she turned it. The room inside was a museum of who she used to be. The bookshelf still held trophies from debate club, framed report cards, and a cracked snow globe that used to play Silent Night. Everything was untouched, frozen in time, as if her parents believed pretending she hadn't grown would keep her under their control. Ellie crossed to the bed and knelt. Her fingers slipped beneath the frame, brushing against the small lockbox she had hidden years ago. The key still hung around her neck, unnoticed by anyone who never looked closely. The lock clicked open. Inside, neatly folded documents, stock certificates, transfer records, notarized shares, the culmination of a decade of quiet, meticulous strategy. She had bought into the Whitmore company piece by piece, reinvesting her own earnings while her family ignored the details. While they mocked her for being the accountant daughter, she had become the silent owner. Ellie sat back. The papers spread across her lap like snowdrifts of truth. Her chest rose slowly, not with triumph, but with something steadier vindication. From downstairs came the faint echo of her sister's voice, sharp with fear. What is she doing up there? Ellie closed the box and stood, tucking the documents inside her coat. She looked around the room one last time, the ghost of the girl they had built and buried. "Collecting what's mine," she whispered. Then she turned toward the staircase, ready to bring the past down with her. When Eleanor Ellie Whitmore descended the stairs, the air in the Whitmore dining room had changed. The guests who once whispered with fascination now sat in uneasy silence, their champagne flat, their smiles gone. Richard Whitmore stood by the fireplace, jaw locked, pretending control he no longer had. Marion Whitmore gripped her wineglass like it could anchor her to the world she'd curated. Victoria Whitmore hovered near the table, eyes wide. Her earlier arrogance dissolved into panic. Ellie stopped at the base of the stairs, her coat still dusted with snow. She placed the small lockbox on the table, the same spot where the ruined poinsettias and abandoned envelope still lay. "This is family business," Richard snapped, voice shaking with the weight of broken authority. "Exactly," Ellie said, opening the box. "Family business, and I own more of it than any of you ever noticed." Papers slid across the table like quiet detonations, notarized documents, share certificates, financial statements bearing her signature. Gasps circled the room. "Those are forged," Marion cried. "Notarized," Ellie replied calmly. "Every share accounted for. While you planned to push me out?" "I was already inside," Victoria's voice cracked. "Why would you do this?" Ellie looked at her sister, her tone steady, almost gentle. "Because you never saw me. You only saw what I could serve. Tonight, I stopped serving." The chandelier light flickered, scattering gold across faces now pale with realization. Ellie gathered the documents, slid them back into the box, and whispered, "I didn't burn this house down. I just stopped holding it up." Then she turned toward the door, leaving behind the empire she'd built and the ghosts still clinging to its ashes.